Hey there, amazing friends. I warmly invite you to join me on this exciting journey by subscribing to my channel, liking, commenting, and sharing my videos. Every like, comment, and share brings us closer together and fuels my passion to create more great content. Your support truly makes all the difference. Thank you for being the heart of this community. Trapped children screams in the old mansion. Strange footsteps in the endless dark corridors. High above the sea cliffs, perched on a rocky outcrop like a sentinel from another era, stood Ashwick Mansion. It had belonged to a long-departed aristocratic family, or so the rumor went. Over centuries, the place had crumbled in parts, patched in others, and steadily acquired a reputation for being unsettling. Rumors whispered of tragedies, disappearing children, odd lights at the windows, and hushed tales of spectral voices echoing in lonely halls. Most locals avoided the mansion. They said the building seemed to breathe with a silent malevolence, as if it resented any sign of life. Still, it was to this mansion that a group of volunteers arrived one overcast afternoon, spurred by urgent phone calls from the caretaker's cousin, claiming had heard shrieks within the walls at night. The caretaker, Mr. Dodgson, usually brushed aside ghost stories, but recently, strange events grew too significant to ignore. Doors slammed when no wind blew, corridors exuded a chilling presence, and at times, faint, desperate cries seemed to resound in the distance. A child's voice, maybe more than one. Dodgson was not a superstitious man, but the mounting anomalies pressed him to ask for help. Leading the volunteers was Clara Hurst, a local historian intrigued by the house's lurid legends. She had no illusions about ghosts. She believed reason could explain such phenomena. With her came Hank, a retired detective known for his calm under pressure, a young architecture student named Miri, whose wide-eyed curiosity about the mansion's design overshadowed any fear, and a seasoned paranormal researcher named Jonah, carrying ghost-hunting gadgets in a battered backpack. They brought cameras, flashlights, and an uneasy mixture of skepticism and excitement. Arriving at the mansion, the sky brooded with low-hanging clouds that threatened rain as they pulled up the gravel drive. Ascending the wide steps, they confronted the mansion's towering facade, carved stone archways flanked by gargoyles whose faces had eroded into grotesque shapes. Mr. Dodgson greeted them at the threshold, shoulders tense. He apologized for the gloom inside. Most electrical wiring was ancient or dead. Candles and a few flickering bulbs would have to suffice. At once, stepping into the grand foyer, the group felt swallowed by shadow. Faint light from the dusty windows illuminated worn carpets and walls lined with portraits. Each portrait subject, presumably a past occupant, stared with lifeless eyes. Clara noted the heavy hush, as if the house withheld its breath. She tried to remain calm, though a chill danced along her spine. They set up a small base of operations in a front sitting room. Jonah pulled out electromagnetic sensors and cameras, explaining had placed them in key corridors. Hank quietly made notes on a map of the mansion's known layout, gleaned from old records. Miri wandered around, marveling at the intricate woodwork. She tapped the floor with her toe, remarking that the boards felt spongy in places. Dodgson explained that the more bizarre events typically happened after dusk. He personally had heard faint voices near the second-floor corridor at night, along with footsteps that seemed to echo in loops. A sense of intangible watchers lurked around corners, but each time he investigated, he found only emptiness. The caretaker's cousin, who had spent a few nights here for company, claimed he heard muffled cries, like children's voices calling for help, coming through the walls or floor. First evening's exploration come nightfall, the volunteers donned headlamps and carried flashlights. Jonah rigged up a few static cameras in corridors, rumored to be active. Clara led them to the second floor, guided by Dodgson. Hank lingered near the back, methodically checking each room, searching for clues of squatters or hidden passages that might explain the weird noises. Miri kept a notebook for architectural notes, but her scribbles shifted towards spiking curiosity about the mansion's secrets. They started down a corridor lined with stained glass windows that overlooked the sea. The glass was so grimy that moonlight barely penetrated. Faded tapestries hung on the walls, depicting archaic scenes of children dancing around a robed figure. Miri found them unsettling. The children's embroidered faces were twisted with odd expressions. The group paused to examine them. Jonah's MF meter flickered, but no immediate pattern emerged. Suddenly, the hush broke with a faint scuffing noise, as if small feet moved just around the corner. "Hello?" Hank called, stepping forward. The corridor ended in a locked door. He tried the knob, stuck. The scuffing noise receded, or maybe disappeared. They forced the door open, revealing a dusty bedroom with ragged drapes. No footprints. No sign of intruders. Shortly after, they heard a soft moan from somewhere behind them. Dashing back, they found only the corridor emptier than before. Jonah's camera had captured no visible shape. Still, he felt convinced something was shifting in the gloom. At 10 o'clock, they regrouped near the main stairwell. They compared notes. No definitive sightings, but recurring small noises like distant footsteps. Dodson insisted it was quieter than usual, as though the house withheld its typical phenomena. Miri ventured a guess that maybe the old walls had peculiar acoustics, channeling wind or dripping water. Hank nodded, but remained uneasy. Rattling doors and the first scream around midnight, the group split up, Jonah and Dodson to check the attic, Clara, Hank, and Miri to re-explore the second-floor library. The mansion's library, rumored to hold old diaries of the original owners, beckoned Clara's curiosity. She hoped to find references to children who might have lived or died here. Creeping past a narrow hall, they felt a sudden draft, though no windows were open. The door to the library rattled, then swung wide on its own. They paused, hearts racing. Clara's flashlight revealed only bookshelves, shadowy corners, and dust-laden carpets. She overcame her hesitation and stepped inside, flipping the old switch. A feeble overhead fixture flickered on, revealing a large wood-paneled room stuffed with tomes. While Miri hovered near a stained glass lamp, Hank rummaged through the desk. Clara scanned the shelves. Many volumes were ancient, histories, genealogies, some crumbling ledgers. She found one titled House of Ashwick, Generational Chronicles. Inside, neat script described births, deaths, and expansions of the mansion. She skimmed until a chilling note from the mid-1800s, references to recurring tragedies, children succumbing to sudden illnesses, or occasionally disappearing into the night. The ledger wrote, "They are claimed by the halls, leaving but echoes of their laughter." An eerie phrase. Meanwhile, Miri yelped softly. Shed heard a noise near her shoulder, a faint rustling from behind a shelf. Hank shone his flashlight, revealing no occupant, only a small opening in the wood paneling. It might be a ventilation duct or a hidden gap. With some prying, they dislodged a loose board. Beneath it lay a narrow, dark passage leading behind the walls. A stale draft wafted out. They exchanged glances. Could this secret corridor be how strange noises traveled? Or how children's voices manifested if some presence lingered within? Hank insisted they wait for Jonah before entering. Yet the lure of discovery proved strong. Clara, flush with urgency, stepped in first, shining her beam into the cramped passage. No more than 3 feet wide, the space extended into shadow, presumably wrapping behind other rooms. Cobwebs clung to corners. The air smelled damp. Miri followed, curiosity burning. Hank guarded the library door. They advanced a short distance, then froze. Dimly from ahead came a childlike whimper, echoing in the narrow space. Clara's heart leapt. She hurried forward, calling gently, "Hello? Is someone there?" The whimper ceased, replaced by silence. Then, with sudden violence, an unseen door slammed somewhere behind them, plunging them into near darkness. Miri gasped, nearly dropping her flashlight. A weight of fear pressed on them. They turned to retreat, only to find the route behind them blocked. Some panel had shifted. Hank pounded from the library side, shouting their names, but his voice grew muffled. Clara and Miri realized they were trapped in this hidden corridor, cut off. The narrow walls pressed in. Mira's breathing grew rapid, stifling panic. Clara forced calm, telling Miri to hold on to her. The only option was to keep moving forward, hoping to find an exit. Jonah's attic encounter up in the attic. Jonah and Dodgson had discovered a sprawling labyrinth of crates, dusty trunks, and spiderwebs. The eaves moaned under the wind. Jonah placed a few sensors near the narrow windows, scanning for temperature drops. Dodgson described hearing moans here some nights. As they ventured deeper, Jonah's camera captured fleeting orbs of dust or faint glows, but nothing definitive. Then, in the far corner, behind a line of disused furniture, they stumbled on something unexpected. Old children's clothing scattered on the floor, small shoes, a torn dress. Dodgson swore these items hadn't been there before. The clothes looked from different eras, as though random sets belonging to various decades. A chill overcame them. Suddenly, a faint shriek rose from below, echoing through the mansion. Jonah spun around, adrenaline surging. It sounded like a child's cry. Dodgson stiffened, eyes wide. They moved quickly back toward the attic stairs, but halfway, they heard another shriek echo from the floor below. Or was it two shrieks blended? The voices sounded young, terrified. Jonah recognized Mira's tone, perhaps. They rushed down, calling out. The corridor on the second floor was empty. No sign of Clara, Hank, or Miri. Another moan drifted from somewhere behind the walls. Jonah hammered on panels, suspecting hidden passages. Dodgson cursed under his breath, admitting the mansion had old service corridors, but few maps existed. Trapped in darkness meanwhile, in that hidden corridor, Clara and Miri edged forward, hearts pounding. Their flashlights revealed rotting boards, possibly leading to old service compartments. At intervals, they passed small, shuttered peepholes that might overlook various rooms. The corridor's path twisted unpredictably. Then the child's voice came again. "Help! Please help me!" Faint, echoing. Miri trembled, tears welling. She called out, "We're here. Where are you?" The voice repeated in a broken sob. "I'm lost. I'm lost." The words drifted from somewhere ahead, as though carried by a draft. They quickened pace, a flicker of hope that a living child needed rescue. After a few turns, the corridor opened into a small chamber lined with decaying shelves. The stench was foul, reminiscent of damp and old decay. On the floor lay a battered teddy bear, its left eye missing. Mira's flashlight fell on streaks of dark stains across the floor. The child's voice had stopped. In the hush, they felt eyes upon them. A shape lurked near the corner, a silhouette, perhaps a young figure. Clara tried to aim her beam, but the silhouette vanished behind a shelf. Miri let out a quivering call. "Wait, we can help you." No response. Then a chilling phenomenon. The lights flickered as if some force drained power. Their flashlights dimmed momentarily. The corridor behind them rattled, footsteps echoing. The stale air felt charged. Miri gasped as the teddy bear slid a few inches on its own, though no one touched it. A rasping exhalation hissed from the darkness. Clara, grappling with rising panic, forced rational thought. Could it be some cunning trick, hidden wires? Or was there truly a paranormal presence? She led Miri across the chamber, searching for another exit. They found a rickety door that led downward into darkness. Facing no alternative, they descended. Hank's frantic search back in the library. Hank hammered on the hidden panel, trying to free Clara and Miri. The door wouldn't budge. He hollered, hearing muffled voices behind it, but with each push, the panel felt jammed by an unknown mechanism. Desperate, he ran into the corridor, calling for Jonah or Dodgson. He discovered Jonah emerging from the attic stairs with Dodgson, both anxious from hearing the screams. Hank explained the hidden panel predicament. The men rushed back, tried prying the panel. No success. They hammered it with a crowbar, but the old boards hardly yielded. The house moaned with each strike, as though resenting their attempts. Jonah's phone beeped, a text from one of his motion sensors. Something or someone was moving swiftly across the third-floor corridor. They debated whether to keep trying to free the hidden panel or follow this new lead. Hank insisted on continuing to smash the panel. Jonah, uncertain, said, "We have to find them. Maybe the corridor leads to the third floor eventually." A compromise. Hank would remain to pry the panel, while Jonah and Dodgson hurried to the third floor to investigate. They parted, tension high. Descending deeper, Clara and Miri followed the narrow staircase downward. The temperature dropped. Their flashlights flickered in the stale air. The steps led to a sub-level corridor that presumably extended beneath the mansion. It smelled of damp stone and old rot. Drips echoed from unseen leaks. The child's voice no longer echoed, replaced by an unsettling silence. They glimpsed scrawls on the walls, childlike drawings of figures with sad faces, some with crosses over their eyes. Mira's voice quavered. "What is this place?" Clara guessed it might be an old basement or service tunnel. But who had scrawled these haunting images? She recalled the ledger references to children once living here, some meeting dreadful fates. They advanced carefully. The corridor branched, one path collapsed by rubble, the other leading to a rusted metal door. Pressing her ear to the door, Clara heard faint whimpers. She pushed the door open, hinges screaming in protest. The smell assaulted them, decay and mold. Inside lay a small subterranean chamber. A single flickering candle, improbably burning on a shelf, cast wild shadows. The stone walls glistened with damp. On the floor, coiled chains and scattered old toys told a macabre story. Miri choked back a sob, glimpsing a child's drawings pinned to the wall. A house, a son, figures labeled Mama and Papa. Torn edges hinted at heartbreak. Then they noticed a crouched figure in the corner, someone small, half hidden. Miri approached gently. It was indeed a child, maybe 9 or 10, wearing ragged clothes, shivering. The child's eyes were wide with terror. "They're in the walls," the child mumbled. "They took my friends." Clara knelt, offering calm reassurance. She asked how the child got here. The child only repeated disjointed phrases about hearing footsteps in the corridors at night, about being lured by laughter. Then a question. "Are you here to help us?" So many are lost in the dark. Before Clara could respond, the candle guttered. The chamber darkened. A new presence seemed to loom. A harsh shriek tore through the space. The child clutched Clara's arm, trembling. Miri screamed, seeing a fleeting silhouette at the threshold, tall, gaunt, inhumanly so. Then it vanished, leaving only the echo of its hiss. Terror in the house upstairs, Hank pried the final nails from the hidden panel. It came loose with a crash, revealing a tight corridor, empty. No sign of Clara or Miri. They must have gone deeper. Hank cursed, stepping in. The corridor branched in uncertain ways. He tried calling out, but only his echo returned. Meanwhile, Jonah and Dodgson reached the third-floor corridor, tracking the sensor's alert. At one corner, they glimpsed a small shape darting into a side room. They followed, hearts pounding. Inside the dusty room, they found no occupant, just a single, battered doll lying on a chair. But the doll's porcelain face was cracked, and fresh footprints in the dust suggested someone was just there. Suddenly, the door slammed behind them. The doorknob wouldn't turn. Then footsteps pattered overhead like a child running on the roof beams, which seemed impossible. The men hammered the door, and after a frantic minute, it inexplicably swung open again. Outside, the corridor was dim and empty. Jonah felt goosebumps prickle his arms. They pressed on, hearing sporadic tapping in the walls. Through cracks in the paneling, they glimpsed fleeting movement. Something in the house was toying with them. Dodgson whispered, "We should leave this to professionals." But Jonah retorted that Clara, Miri, and possibly lost children needed them now. They trudged on, determined. A gathering of shadows in the underground chamber, Clara held the child's trembling hand. She and Miri resolved to lead them out. The child muttered about others trapped in bigger rooms, but had no sure directions. As they left the chamber, faint lamplight guided them down another corridor. The footsteps behind them had grown frequent. The child cowered, saying, "They're here." They hide in the dark. Turning a corner, they confronted a large, rusted gate. Beyond it lay a wide, crypt-like space with pillars. Strange scrawls covered the walls, shapes reminiscent of the scrawl upstairs, childlike drawings, but twisted. The flicker of a lone lantern lit the gloom. And there, to their horror, were more children, 4 or 5, huddled in corners, eyes empty, as if enthralled or terrified. Clara and Miri rushed forward. But the moment they entered, a clang resounded. The gate slammed shut behind them, sealed by an unseen force. The child with them cried out in panic. Miri tried tugging the gate, but it wouldn't budge. Footsteps approached from somewhere behind the pillars, heavy, deliberate. Then a tall figure emerged, half in shadow. Its face was obscured, but it stood unnaturally still. An indescribable dread gripped them. The figure seemed more a manifestation of the house's darkness than a normal being. In a raspy voice, it commanded, "They belong here. The corridors keep them. You cannot take them away." Clara's mind reeled. Was this a living person? A monstrous caretaker? Some inhuman specter? She gathered her courage and demanded to free the children. The figure let out a low, inhuman hiss. The children cowered. In that tense standoff, Miri tried to approach one child. The figure slid forward with impossible speed, seizing Mira's arm. She screamed, feeling an icy coldness emanate from its grasp, as though it drained her warmth. Clara lunged, brandishing a metal rod found on the floor. She struck the figure's arm. It recoiled with a shriek. The children whimpered. The figure vanished behind a pillar, its movements blurring. Then, overhead, the vaulted ceiling reverberated with swirling shadows. Faint screams echoed from every direction, the house itself seeming to speak. A last-ditch escape Hank, lost in the hidden corridors above, eventually heard Mira's scream echo through vents. He followed the sound, descending a flight of steps until he reached a locked grate. Through the bars, he glimpsed flickering torchlight in a large underground space, Clara, Miri, and some children cornered by a malevolent silhouette. Battering the grate with all his might, Hank tried to break it open. Meanwhile, Jonah and Dodgson, hearing the commotion from the main floor, found a trapdoor in the kitchen leading down. They forced it open, revealing steps to the same subterranean region. With flashlights raised, they stumbled into a narrow tunnel. They saw the tall figure looming at the far end near an iron gate, with Clara and Mary behind it. Jonah shouted, shining his flashlight. The bright beam caught the figure's face, a ghastly visage, half human, half consumed by darkness. It screeched, retreating from the light. Hank, seizing the moment, hammered the grate from outside, while Jonah advanced from the tunnel. In a frenzy of clangs and desperate yells, they battered the lock on the iron gate. The figure, shrieking, tried to push forward again, but a bright beam from Jonah's flashlight repelled it as if light pained it. The locked gate snapped open under Hank's determined blows. Clara, Mary, and the children rushed out. The figure lunged once more, only to hiss and withdraw at the harsh glare. The group fled up the corridor, children in tow. The entity's shrieks echoed behind them, but a sense of intangible boundary overcame it, or perhaps fear of their combined presence. They emerged into the mansion's basement rooms, then scrambled upstairs to the ground floor, hearts pounding. Aftermath. In the early dawn light, the group and caretaker led the frightened children outside. Some had vanished only days ago, others months. Paramedics soon arrived, alerted by Hank's call. The children were exhausted, some near catatonic, but alive. Their accounts were disjointed, shadowy shapes, footsteps in dark corridors, illusions of friendly voices leading them deeper. Behind them, Ashwick Mansion seemed to slump in gloom. The caretaker, shaken to the core, swore to seal off the sublevel and possibly demolish sections. Jonah, reviewing his recordings, found partial glimpses of a tall silhouette and bizarre audio of overlapping childlike screams. But the footage was inconclusive, as if the presence resisted being captured. Local authorities, confronted with so many rescued children, launched a deeper inquiry. They found hidden corridors, old chain-laden rooms, scrawled childish murals. Yet no sign of a living captor. Some suspected a twisted caretaker from the past had set up these labyrinths, letting some malevolent force linger. Others whispered the entity had roamed these halls for centuries, feeding on fear. Clara's research uncovered diaries from a 19th century occupant who wrote of the house's thirst for young laughter, devouring them in the corridors. She believed a supernatural curse had festered in the mansion, birthed by old tragedies. Miri, though traumatized, took solace in having saved real children. She parted with Clara, vowing never to step in that place again. Hank quietly left, returning to his retired life, but forever changed. He insisted the house was more than haunted, that something abominable thrived within its walls. Jonah, the paranormal researcher, confided that never had he encountered such tangible malevolence. He recommended the building be exorcised or razed. The mansion's fate. A few weeks later, demolition crews arrived. However, logistical complications and local heritage arguments halted the process. Some local historians argued the mansion was historically significant. Bureaucratic red tape intervened. Meanwhile, the caretaker refused to remain on the premises overnight. He visited only by day, swearing that faint childlike cries still reverberated in the attic. Eventually, partial demolition began, tearing down the worst rotted wings and sealing the secret corridors. But rumors persisted that deeper underground tunnels remained intact, harboring that dark presence. Unsurprisingly, the project stalled once more, leaving the mansion's core standing. The townsfolk generally avoided it entirely. In subsequent years, stories occasionally surfaced. A trespasser or thrill-seeker claimed to hear footsteps chasing them through half-demolished halls, or see fleeting childlike silhouettes behind dusty windows. The screams, if any, were muffled, but rumored to echo when storms raged. Whether the place still held trapped spirits or the remnant of that monstrous figure, no one ventured to find out. Epilogue: most children rescued from the subterranean labyrinth eventually moved away, seeking distance from memories of gloom. Some refused to speak of their ordeal. Others admitted nightmares where they were lured back by ghostly singing in endless corridors. The tale of the trapped children's screams and the strange footsteps in that old mansion sank into local legend, a cautionary tale, a tragedy best left in hushed corners. Clara, asked to speak on a local radio show, summarized that the mansion had been a magnet for sorrow, shaped by centuries of hidden evils and perhaps a supernatural hunger. She believed that some mysteries refused to yield wholly to logic. Hank, listening from his modest home, agreed in silence. In the deserted mansion's remains, shadows gather at twilight. The wind whistles through half-collapsed ceilings, forging illusions of voices calling for help. If you dare approach its gates at dusk, you might catch the echo of a child's shriek reverberating in corridors now strangled by debris. You might sense a creeping shape flit by the broken windows, too swift and silent to be wholly human. And in those moments, you remember the children who once vanished into the labyrinth, the footsteps that tracked them in the gloom, and the final confrontation in a sub-level crypt of horror. The old mansion stands as a tomb for all such nightmares, an enduring reminder that some places breed darkness so thick that even rescue can't fully banish the echoes of terror. The watchers of that place swear the house is never truly empty, that a presence stirs still, listening for innocent voices to draw inside. So heed the warning. If you hear faint screams or swift footfalls in a corridor that stretches on forever, it may be too late. The old mansion's secrets remain, waiting in the dark, always hungry for one more tragic echo of life.